Above the burning skies of Northern Europe, a lone American fighter pilot faces a choice no training could prepare him for. With hundreds of lives on the line, he does the unthinkable, crashing his plane into the enemy to save a crippled bomber formation. One instant, one act, echoes across the war forever. Dawn breaks over the North Sea, casting a pale gray light across the clouds. Below, the industrial heart of Nazi Germany hums with deadly efficiency. Rail yards, factories, and oil refineries pumping the lifeblood of war into Hitler's war machine. High above, the sky is already alive with motion. Four-engine bombers, B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 liberators stretch in tight formations, their aluminum skin reflecting the first rays of light. Each aircraft carries not just bombs, but the weight of lives. 20 crews per plane, young men barely out of training, all thrust into a war that demands perfection and punishes hesitation. Among them flies 2nd Lieutenant James Jimmy Harrington of the 357th Fighter Group, a 22-year-old pilot from Ohio. He grips the control yoke of his P-51 Mustang, its engine roaring like a caged beast, the wind whipping past his helmet, rattling the instruments on the dashboard. His unit is tasked with escorting the bombers deep into the heart of Germany, protecting them from the Luftwaffe that waits hungrily below. Jimmy is acutely aware of the stakes. Inexperience is a liability, and every error can send a bomber spiraling into the earth, leaving shattered crews in its wake. Smoke curls from a B-17 trailing to his left, black ribbons slicing through the morning sky. Anti-aircraft flak erupts from below, bursts exploding in jagged orange blooms, throwing shrapnel and terror across the formation. Harrington's Mustang dips and weaves, feeling the vibrations of nearby blasts. The smell of engine oil and burning metal fills the cramped cockpit. Around him, voices crackle over the radio. Calls for formation adjustments, reports of damage, and the occasional cry of panic. There is courage here, yes, but also raw fear. Young men, thrust into a deadly ballet, clinging to protocol and each other for survival. Below, the bombers tremble like trapped birds, their formation tenuous. The German industrial cities are heavily defended, and every sortie is a gamble. Harrington watches as tracer fire streaks past a nearby bomber, igniting a wing in flames. Somewhere in the distance, the ominous silhouette of a Me-109 or FW-190 blurs against the clouds, a predator sizing up its prey. The human mind can only process so much at once. The roar of engines, the whistle of wind, the shriek of anti-aircraft bursts. And yet pilots like Jimmy must remain sharp, calculating every maneuver, every shot. And then the radar screen blinks, a small, glowing promise of horror. Enemy interceptors closing fast. The bomber formation tightens instinctively, a fragile wall of metal and will. Jimmy feels a lump rise in his throat, the bitter cocktail of adrenaline and dread. The men below, trusting his unit to shield them, have no idea what is coming. In the distance, dark specks multiply against the horizon, German fighters slicing through the sky with deadly intent. Smoke drifts on the horizon, and the roar of engines grows louder, mingling with the cries of the men and the whip of the wind. The moment of reckoning is near. Every decision, every split-second maneuver will determine who lives and who is lost. Above the clouds, in the cold and cruel expanse of the European sky, the young American pilot steels himself for the storm approaching. A storm that will test courage, skill, and the very limits of human endurance. Radar beeps again. The black silhouettes are closer now. The formation braces. By mid-morning, the bomber formation is a glittering river of steel stretching across the clouds. Above them, the P-51 Mustangs of the 357th Fighter Group carve protective arcs through the thin air, guardians of fragile aluminum fortresses hurtling toward the heart of Nazi Germany. Their mission is precise. Ensure that every B-17 and B-24 reaches its target and returns. The stakes are immense. Each bomber carries 20 men, young Americans barely old enough to vote, bound together by training, trust, and the unspoken understanding that failure is often fatal. In the tight formation, the bombers fly like clockwork, wings brushing the sky with disciplined precision. The The men inside think of home. Letters unread, families waiting, sweethearts and mothers praying for safe return. In the nose of a B-17 nicknamed Liberty Bell, Sergeant Thomas Reed clutches a folded photograph of his young daughter, her face smiling back at him amid the din of engines. The bomber's payload is heavy, every ton of bombs a reminder of the destructive mission that awaits them. Each plane is vulnerable, sluggish under its own weight, and exposed to flak batteries that litter the Ruhr and Rhineland. The fighters weave above, below, and around the formation, ever alert. Their P-51s, agile and lethal, are designed for speed and precision, but protecting the lumbering bombers demands more than technology. It demands instinct, split-second decision-making, and absolute trust. Pilots like Lieutenant James Jimmy Harrington monitor the sky constantly, scanning for movement, calculating angles, and anticipating the enemy's attack. Even minor mistakes can cascade into disaster. A bomber left unshielded for a single moment can be torn apart by a Me-109 or FW-190. Fuel is finite, and every turn, every evasive maneuver exacts a cost. Formation flying is a delicate ballet, wings inches apart at 3,000 feet, engines throttled, guns primed. The bomber crews endure not only the physical strain, the deafening engines, freezing altitudes, flak shrapnel, but the psychological weight of responsibility. To drop their payload accurately, to survive, to return to loved ones. Suddenly, movement, a flash of metal against the clouds. Enemy fighters appear on the horizon, slicing through the sky with lethal precision. The 357th reacts instantly, throttling engines, climbing, diving, guns scanning. Stray rounds whistle past the bombers, setting one B-17 aflame in the midsection. Smoke trails curl into the sky as gunners fire back, their stomachs knotted, their hands steady. Chaos reigns in microseconds. Evasive maneuvers, tight banking, tracer rounds illuminating the air like deadly fireworks. Rules of engagement demand discipline, yet instinct pushes pilots toward heroism. Harrington dives to intercept an FW-190, leaving a portion of the formation exposed. Every decision a gamble between courage and duty. The human element dominates. The bond between the fighters and the bomber crews is intangible but absolute. They rely on each other, share a silent pact written in fire and sky. Amid the thunder and smoke, the first B-17 falters, its starboard engine hit, flames licking the fuselage. Pilots scream over the radio, gunners fire frantically, and the formation tightens instinctively. The sky has become a crucible testing skill, nerve, and humanity alike. Even as the P-51s position themselves for defense, the tension does not ease. Enemy fighters are relentless. Flak bursts continue to erupt below, and every second carries the weight of life and death. The storm of battle has only just begun, and the young Americans must navigate not just the skies, but the moral and physical demands of warfare on a scale few can comprehend. The sky over the Ruhr Valley erupts into chaos. The morning calm, a deceptive quiet, shatters as German fighters descend from cloud cover like steel-hungry predators. Tracer rounds streak through the air, carving ribbons of light across the gray expanse. Explosions from flak below throw showers of black smoke and orange fire into the formation, shaking the bombers like leaves in a storm. The air vibrates with the deafening roar of engines, punctuated by the shriek of damaged metal and the cries of men under fire. In the heart of the formation, a B-17 Flying Fortress bears the brunt of the assault. Its left wing is scorched, panels ripped open, one of its 4 engines smoking and sputtering. The bomber wobbles precariously, struggling to maintain altitude, its once orderly formation fracturing around it. Every pilot in the escort squadron sees the danger. To the untrained eye, the sky might seem chaotic, but these men operate in disciplined panic, scanning constantly, calculating every maneuver, every shot fired and received. Lieutenant James Harrington grips the yoke of his Mustang tighter, heart pounding. Orders dictate that he maintain formation, protect all bombers evenly. But instinct screams to act, to shield the stricken fortress before it's too late. The moral calculus is immediate. Intervene and risk leaving others exposed, or adhere strictly to protocol and watch a crew be cut down. Hesitation is a luxury no pilot can afford. Other P-51s dive in to engage the attacking Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s. Bullets punch through aluminum skin, igniting fuel lines, tearing fuselage, and sending sparks into the sky. Gunners in the bomber return fire with .50 caliber Browning machine guns, tracer rounds flickering like fireflies against the gray clouds. Smoke coils from the wounded B-17, drifting upward, a spectral signal of danger that every pilot recognizes. Inside the damaged bomber, crew members fight for survival. The tail gunner yells over the intercom, a mixture of fear and defiance, reporting enemy fighters closing in. The navigator adjusts the course, sweat mixing with soot on his face. The bombardier braces against the jolting frame, bombs still secured in the bay below. Every action is amplified by the knowledge that a single enemy attack could destroy them. Harrington maneuvers his Mustang, cutting off a Bf-109 attempting a lethal deflection pass. His guns blaze, tracer fire connecting with fuselage, forcing the German fighter to peel away. Another Mustang swoops in to intercept a second attacker. Coordination is rapid, almost instinctive, a choreography born of training, trust, and desperation. Yet the stricken B-17 continues to drift, its crew vulnerable to the next wave. The sensory assault is total. The acrid tang of smoke, the deafening engines, the staccato rhythm of machine guns, and the faint, distant thuds of exploding flak. The air is thick with the smell of burning metal and fear. Above, the clouds blur, turning the sky into a shifting battlefield of steel and fire. And then, amid the cacophony, a shadow looms. A German fighter breaks through the protective screen and locks on the crippled fortress. His guns are trained, calculated, and ready. Harrington and the other escorts dive with precision, but the outcome hangs in the balance. Seconds stretch into eternity. The bomber quivers under the strain. Every pilot knows what is at stake. One misstep, one failure, and the fortress, and all 20 souls within, will be lost to history. The sky narrows, compressing into a crucible of fire, smoke, and steel. Lieutenant James Harrington's Mustang dives and climbs in near-impossible arcs, tracing the wounded B-17 as it falters beneath him. Tracer rounds streak past, whistling with lethal intent, while flak eruptions send jagged fragments of metal slicing through the cloud-laden sky. Each second stretches, measured not in time, but in the lives hanging by the thinnest thread. Harrington's mind races, a storm of training, instinct, and raw emotion. Duty compels him to protect the bomber, to defend every soul aboard, but strategy, protocol, and the limitations of his Mustang remind him that every aggressive maneuver carries its own deadly risk. Hesitation could cost lives, yet a single miscalculation could destroy more than it saves. History is filled with examples of pilots forced into impossible decisions. Luftwaffe pilots in 1940 who, when ammunition ran out, resorted to ramming British bombers, sacrificing their own lives in desperate acts of courage. The precedent is stark, the stakes undeniable. Bullets tear past the Mustang, pinging off the fuselage, a constant reminder that the line between survival and death is razor-thin. Smoke from the crippled bomber drifts in thick, acrid columns, curling into the formation like a dark omen. Harrington scans frantically. The attacking FW-190 has latched onto the B-17's weakened starboard wing, firing with precision that leaves scorch marks along the aluminum skin. The fortress shudders, metal groaning, one engine failing entirely, the crew fighting to keep her aloft. Every muscle in Harrington's body screams for action. He calculates angles, velocity, and distance with a precision honed over months of sorties, each split-second decision a balance between heroism and recklessness. The moral dimension presses down harder than any enemy fighter. These are not machines, but 20 men with families, letters home, futures tethered to the fragile wings of a dying bomber. The Mustang's guns are armed, but even a strafing run risks ricochet, structural collapse, or leaving the formation exposed to other interceptors. He dives low, skimming past tracer fire and flak bursts, the wind whipping past the cockpit in a scream of pressure and velocity. Below, the B-17 lurches violently, smoke trailing, gunners firing with desperate focus. Harrington remembers accounts from the 8th Air Force archives. Bomber crews praising the selfless interventions of fighter pilots, men who placed themselves between death and those they were sworn to protect. Courage, the historical record shows, is never clean. It is a calculation, a choice made amid chaos and mortal danger. Time contracts. Harrington's Mustang climbs, aligning with the enemy fighter preparing for the killing blow. The horizon tilts as he maneuvers into a position that is both tactical and terrifyingly close to a point of no return. The sky feels suffocating. The roar of engines and the whistle of bullets, a chorus of imminent judgment. Every heartbeat is amplified, the gravity of his decision crushing yet clarifying. In the cockpit, Harrington steels himself, mind and body synchronized in an almost ritual precision. The choice is clear. Act decisively and risk everything, or hesitate and witness the bomber's destruction. Seconds from catastrophe, he lines up the Mustang, calculating a course that balances aggression with survival, precision with courage. A maneuver that could save 20 lives or claim his own in the sky above Nazi Germany. The moment hangs suspended, taut as a drawn wire, and the world narrows to a single, impossible line between life and death. The sky narrows into a corridor of fire and steel as Lieutenant James Harrington lines up his Mustang for the desperate maneuver. The wounded B-17, its left wing blackened and smoke curling from a failing engine, drifts at 22,000 feet, barely maintaining altitude. Harrington pushes the throttle forward, the P-51's Packard Merlin engine roaring, its supercharged pistons screaming as the Mustang accelerates past 400 miles per hour. Every instrument trembles under the stress, the airframe straining against the forces of gravity and velocity. Ahead, the Focke-Wulf FW-190 locks onto the crippled bomber, its guns trained with lethal precision. Harrington's mind calculates fractions of seconds. Angle of approach, closure rate, wind shear, and the vulnerable points of the German fighter. In this moment, training, instinct, and sheer resolve converge. He commits to a course that is as bold as it is deadly. The Mustang closes with terrifying speed, slicing through the air in a white-knuckled descent, tracers and flak erupting around him like hellfire. Metal screams as wings connect. The Mustang strikes the FW-190 with its propeller and wingtip, a violent, bone-jarring collision that sends shockwaves through both aircraft. Sparks explode into the sky, the smell of burning oil and scorched aluminum filling the cockpit. The German fighter spirals violently, uncontrollable, smoke trailing its fuselage as it begins a fatal descent toward the earth. Harrington's Mustang shudders violently, the impact testing the limits of its structure. The G-forces pinning him against the seat, muscles screaming, vision narrowing at the edges. Inside the B-17, crew members witness the event in stunned silence. Smoke curls along their battered fuselage, yet the deadly FW-190 begins its final descent away from them. Gunners swivel to track the enemy's fall. Adrenaline still pumping, faces a mixture of awe, grief, and gratitude. The young Americans aboard, minutes from potential annihilation, now cling to life with renewed focus, their survival momentarily secured by an act of selfless audacity. Letters home, the dreams of loved ones, and the fragile hope of returning from this inferno weigh heavier than any machine. Harrington fights to stabilize his Mustang. The P-51 trembles from the collision, control surfaces strained, and rudder vibrating violently. Altimeter needles swing, airspeed fluctuates near 420 miles per hour, and the sky tilts under the intense maneuvers required to regain equilibrium. Every pull, push, and bank of the aircraft is a negotiation with death itself. The German fighter, shredded and tumbling, disappears into the clouds below. Harrington glances back at the B-17 formation, still faltering but intact. Bomber crews exchange looks over the intercom, their relief tempered by the awareness that their savior has placed himself in extreme peril. Behind the adrenaline and the chaos, the stark reality remains. The Mustang, now damaged, could fail at any moment. The bomber formation steadies, engines straining against the altitude, flak bursts fading into the distance. For a fleeting moment, the carnage of the raid is suspended. Lives have been preserved, and one act of extraordinary courage has shifted the balance. Yet above the clouds, amidst smoke and wind, the fate of the ramming pilot hangs uncertain, a solitary figure against the vast, unforgiving expanse of the European sky. The formation survives, but the question remains. Will Harrington return, or has the sky claimed another hero? The sky, once a theater of fire and chaos, falls eerily silent. The deafening roar of engines has softened, tracer streaks fade into the gray expanse, and smoke curls lazily from battered bombers struggling to maintain altitude. One by one, the B-17 flying fortresses, their aluminum skins scorched and riddled with flak holes, begin to regroup. Wings tilt cautiously, pilots adjusting for damaged engines, control surfaces screaming under strain, each maneuver a testament to the skill and resilience forged in the crucible of aerial combat. On board the surviving bombers, the atmosphere is taut with exhaustion and disbelief. Crew members check each other, listening for replies over the intercom, hands trembling as adrenaline ebbs. Gunners inspect shattered plexiglass, flight engineers monitor failing engines, and navigators recalculate courses to ensure the remaining formation can reach friendly airspace. The B-17 that had been saved by Harrington's daring ramming maneuver now limps toward the North Sea, its crew alive but acutely aware of the razor-thin line they had walked between life and death. Eyewitness accounts later recalled the mixture of shock, awe, and gratitude that swept through the formation. The crews had seen courage manifested in metal and muscle, a pilot placing himself between destruction and the lives of 20 men. Flight logs and air traffic reports record the details. Altitudes averaging 22,000 feet, airspeeds fluctuating between 350 and 420 miles per hour, and evasive maneuvers lasting for nearly 20 minutes under constant threat from flak and fighters. According to 8th Air Force archives, the survival rate for heavily loaded B-17 formations on deep strikes into the Ruhr during early 1943 hovered around 50%, underscoring the razor edge of fate that defined these missions. As the battered formation limps back toward friendly territory, relief mixes with mourning. Letters home and photographs tucked into pockets now seem weightier than ever, the human stakes of aerial warfare brought into sharp relief. Pilots who had witnessed Harrington's collision spoke quietly among themselves, the recognition of heroism mingled with apprehension. The Mustang that had executed the ramming maneuver had vanished from sight moments after impact, leaving the fate of its pilot unknown. Upon returning to base, protocol takes hold. Debriefings are methodical. Damage assessments, crew reports, and casualty tallies recorded with precision. Engineers inspect aircraft for structural integrity, gunners for spent ammunition, and officers compile records for operational review. Casualty reports list wounded, missing, and killed in action. Posthumous awards are considered for acts of extraordinary courage. Recommendations travel up the chain of command, formalized in citations that may never fully convey the human drama witnessed in the clouds. Among the crews, the conversations turn to Harrington. Though his fate is uncertain, the tale of his selfless maneuver begins to circulate, whispered between pilots and gunners, then logged officially. The story spreads beyond the base, reaching Air Force headquarters and eventually the press. In the immediate aftermath, the sky has granted survival to the bomber crews, but it has also left a singular question suspended: the identity of the pilot who risked everything for others, and whether he will return to walk among them again. The clouds above Europe slowly part, revealing the sun glinting off a landscape scarred by war. For those who survive, the day is etched in memory, a mixture of grief, relief, and the profound awareness that heroism often comes at the highest possible cost. In the days following the raid, the story of Lieutenant James Harrington's daring maneuver spreads like wildfire through the ranks of the 8th Air Force. Accounts from bomber crews, gunners, and fellow Mustang pilots coalesce into a single, undeniable narrative. A young pilot, faced with impossible odds, had risked everything to save 20 men trapped in a crippled B-17 over the heart of Germany. The skies above the Ruhr had borne witness to a moment of extraordinary courage, one that would resonate far beyond the clouds. Recognition begins formally, as reports are filed. Eyewitness testimonies compiled, and operational logs cross-referenced. Military protocol moves deliberately, yet it cannot diminish the human immediacy of the act. Harrington is recommended for the Distinguished Service Cross, his name appearing in dispatches and operational reviews. Even as the award process unfolds, the legend begins to take shape organically. Crews speak of him in hushed reverence, new pilots learn of his actions during briefings, and the story becomes a touchstone of morale, a symbol of the bond between fighter and bomber that defined the Allied air campaign. The psychological impact is tangible. For bomber crews, the knowledge that a Mustang pilot would place himself between death and them strengthens resolve. For fellow fighter pilots, Harrington's selfless decision becomes a measure of the highest standard of courage, a reminder that heroism is not only in victory, but in the willingness to confront mortality for the sake of others. Letters from airmen express awe and gratitude, while unit diaries reflect how such acts, even isolated, bolster the collective spirit in a campaign defined by staggering attrition. By late 1943, a single deep penetration mission over Germany could see 20 to 30% of bombers damaged or destroyed. Beyond the immediate circles of airmen, the story begins to touch the broader strategic narrative. Each bomber saved represents more than lives. It preserves crews trained for the long, grueling fight over Europe, maintains the momentum of industrial strikes that cripple German war production, and underscores the human cost of sustaining air superiority. The skies of Europe are a ledger of sacrifice, and Harrington's act is a vivid, human line etched across that record. Historians later note that such moments, though rare, illuminate the essence of air warfare. Courage measured not in statistics alone, but in instantaneous choices where lives, machines, and morality intersect. Harrington's ramming maneuver becomes emblematic of the moral and psychological terrain of World War II air combat, a testament to selflessness born under fire. In the quiet after the storm, the surviving bomber crews return to base, their planes battered but aloft, their hearts carrying the weight of what they witnessed. Heroism, the story suggests, is often born in the narrowest margins, where impossible choices demand extraordinary resolve. The echoes of valor linger, shaping memory, inspiring comrades, and affirming that in war, the measure of courage is both human and timeless. Long after the engines have cooled and the flak has faded into memory, the skies over Europe retain the echoes of that day. Lieutenant James Harrington's daring act, the ramming of a Focke-Wulf FW-190 to save a crippled B-17, did not vanish with the clouds. It became a thread woven into the vast tapestry of World War II air warfare, preserved in operational reports, mission logs, and the meticulous records of the 8th Air Force. Flight diaries, official after-action reports, and crew debriefings chronicle the event with the precision demanded by military bureaucracy. Yet behind the statistics lies the human heart of the story. Courage, sacrifice, and the moral weight borne by those who fly into the inferno. Memoirs and interviews with bomber crews underscore the lasting resonance of the incident. Airmen recount the moment with a mixture of reverence and disbelief. How a young pilot, trained in the calculus of survival, chose a course that defied both instinct and protocol. In the personal archives of the 8th Air Force, letters from crew members speak of silent gratitude, the way a single act of heroism could crystallize the fragile bond between fighter and bomber, trust forged at 22,000 feet under the shadow of death. For decades afterward, these testimonies would serve as both historical record and moral touchstone, a reminder that human decisions in war reverberate far beyond the battlefield. The story reached the public through wartime press and later post-war histories. Newspapers highlighted the dramatic heroism, framing it within the larger narrative of Allied courage and the relentless air campaign against Nazi industry. Propaganda reels and news reports emphasized valor and selflessness, using Harrington's act to inspire morale on the home front. Post-war, historians would reference the mission not only as an example of personal bravery but as a case study in the ethical and tactical dilemmas of air combat. The tension between duty and instinct, the question of risk versus preservation, and the moral calculus that defined fighter-bomber interactions across the European theater. Tactically, the incident reflects a broader evolution in aerial warfare. The vulnerability of B-17 formations to Luftwaffe fighters had prompted the development of tighter defensive formations, long-range fighter escorts, and the integration of coordinated maneuvers between bombers and fighters. Harrington's action, while extraordinary, illustrates the human element that technology and strategy alone could never fully replicate. The ethics of war, the paradox of violence enacted to preserve life, and the willingness of a single pilot to intervene in a lethal equation all became embedded in training manuals, after-action reviews, and the collective consciousness of Allied aviators. The emotional resonance of the story endures precisely because it captures the duality of combat. Destruction and protection, fear and courage, mortality confronted with moral choice. Veteran reunions, oral histories, and museum exhibits continue to highlight the mission, ensuring that Harrington's decision is not lost amid statistics or strategic summaries. The image of a Mustang diving into the path of death, saving a fortress aloft despite overwhelming odds, remains a visual and moral icon, a testament to the capacity of individuals to shape events, even amid industrial-scale war. As the decades pass, the clouds over Europe have cleared, leaving skies that are calm, open, and silent. Yet in archives, memoirs, and the fading voices of survivors, the memory of that day lingers. It is carried in the steel of restored aircraft, in photographs of young airmen smiling before missions, in the meticulous records of those who catalogued every sortie, and in the moral reflection that courage, sacrifice, and human judgment endure long after the smoke of battle has dissipated. The skies that once bore the roar of engines, the whistle of bullets, and the flash of flak now stand as a canvas for memory. In that empty, open space, the legacy of bravery shines through, reminding us that even amid the violence of war, the choices of a single individual can carve a story that echoes across generations. A story of selflessness, heroism, and the human heart in the clouds.